Hey there, welcome back to another video. This time around, it is my review of the 2005 comedy Waiting. Now, before I get around to sharing more of my thoughts on this film, I want to give a special shout out to Brock for requesting this review. And if there's another film, TV show, or topic that you would like to see me discuss in the future, feel free to donate to my PayPal. The link will be in the video description down below, and I'll try to get to it as soon as I possibly can. Now, Waiting is, in my opinion, one of those comedies that, in a lot of ways, is just like your average so-so dinner at a run-of-the-mill restaurant, which is pretty ironic considering that this film it takes place at a restaurant and deals with the wait staff and the cooks and the people who work in the restaurant and the different dynamics between different people who work at the restaurant as well as the customers who come in and the shenanigans that ensue. I mean, to the point where even the restaurant they work at is called Shenanigans. And there's some fun to be had here. It definitely does have a great cast. But it's one of those films, though, for me, it's just pretty disposable and just kind of there. Like, it's not awful. It's not unwatchable. I think the sequel, Still Waiting, is like, now that is trash. This, though, I can watch it for the cast and for the premise, because I don't necessarily work in the food industry, but I do work in the service industry technically as somebody who works in retail. So there's a lot of interactions with customers and people being difficult and other stuff involving coworkers that I definitely can relate to. So if you've worked in customer service, or you've worked with people, or definitely if you've worked in the food service, I would say that this is definitely something that really resonates with some people. But I've technically also worked in other facets of retail. Like, I worked at a movie theater that also sold and delivered food to customers in the theater. So I do have a brief little experience in terms of dealing with that kind of thing. So I do remember how some people would have difficult orders that they would ask for. I remember coworkers being either just too intense or just being absolute fucking louses. So I do remember a lot of that stuff. So that is something that definitely does resonate with me. Not necessarily as deeply, though, as it might for other people who actually have worked as a waiter or have worked directly with customers in this particular uh, avenue of work. Now, the movie is directed by Rob McKittrick, and this is a guy who really he hasn't done like a ton of stuff. Like, I think he's more known for a writing stuff than he is necessarily as a director. Um, Really, this is his only film. This is the only movie that he directed, is Waiting. And I can kind of see why, because the film has a really good cast, and the concept of it, and the premise, and the overall setting is good, but the direction is like a well done steak with no seasoning. Like, it's just very bland. There's really not a lot of unique camera techniques that are on display here. It's very let's just say paint by numbers when it comes to the direction. Really nothing special. It's like an unseasoned, well done steak. Like, it's edible, but it's not something that you would necessarily ask for or order again. It's that kind of thing where it needs some seasoning, it needs some more flavor to it, and what you get is just very bland and boring for a film that has such a great cast, for a film that has some scenes that definitely do seem like they could have a lot of energy, the direction is very flat, just very lukewarm. And I do feel like a better director who has a better sense of comedic timing, better sense of energy or verve or vitality, or a director that just has more experience, I think really would have paid a lot of dividends when it comes to this movie. Um, it's just one of those things where a lot of great comedies have directors who can really add something extra to the film and make scenes funnier, make scenes more memorable and iconic. And a lot of the direction in this just very standard and just very boring. And it does hurt the film sometimes, at least for me personally. It makes it definitely come across like the low budget film that it is. And on top of that, it just makes it feel not really that special. And I think there are some arguments to be had or to be made when it comes to this style of direction maybe being in the film's favor in terms of adding some realism to it. But that gets old fast because it's not like a mockumentary or something. So when it comes to this kind of movie, you want a little bit more energy, a little bit more spark to it, and you don't really get that with the direction here by McKittrick. Now he also wrote the film, and I do think his script is better than his direction. But I think the script also has its issues. But before I get to the issues of the script, I'll just mention the positives. I think it does do a good job providing the perspective of the coworkers at Shenanigans and what they're dealing with and the different personalities and how they clash with one another. And I do feel that it nails difficult customer interactions with like Karens or Darrens or just difficult nasty people. And there definitely is a certain bit of catharsis when it comes to the Karen getting put in her place and given a dish that is full of a lot of extra added ingredients. Uh and there are some other stuff too involving the plot that I think are relatively effective. Like I think a lot of the stuff involving Ryan Reynolds' character and him and what's going on with his his connection with other people at the restaurant, as well as him just kind of dealing with his own issues outside of the restaurant and how that also ties in with everything that's going on in his life. I think that's a decent bit of the script. I definitely feel the stuff going on that with Dean and his character. I think that's arguably the strongest aspect of the script is Dean and him just struggling with a lot of things, struggling with his place in life, trying to figure out where he wants to go, and not necessarily wanting to change things so drastically, but also at the same time realizing that this might be a good opportunity. So the whole drama with him maybe becoming assistant manager and all of that is something that I do feel is pretty strong and absolutely some of the best writing. And it's funny to me that the film is marketed and structured and set up as this gross out kind of frat comedy that deals with people who work at a restaurant. And that, in a lot of ways, that is what the film is. But there's a lot of stuff involving Dean's character in terms of him coming to realizations about certain paths to take in his life. And I think that resonates more strongly to me than really a lot of the crass humor in this script is the stuff with Dean just ultimately realizing that he doesn't have to stay in a job that he doesn't like. He doesn't have to stay in a situation that he's not necessarily as enamored with anymore just because it's a job. Like he can quit the job. He doesn't have to take the opportunity to become an assistant manager. He doesn't have to deal with that pressure. He doesn't have to do that. He has other paths and other avenues to take in his life. And that provides him with more self worth as well as self realization. And there's also a bit of a love story going on too, but not really to the same capacity as other stories that you might see with other characters and in other films like this. There's this guy who's hired to essentially be the new uh in a lot of ways the new Dean. He's going to replace Dean eventually, but it happens sooner rather than later with this character named Mitch. And Mitch, he's the newbie who's trained the and shown the ways of shenanigans and all the different rules and so on. And initially he's gonna quit, but then he gets appreciation from the other coworkers, and they convince him to stay. And it's kind of set up in a way where you would think that maybe in another script this would be something that would be like a huge win for the Mitch character, but with the way that a lot of the script is, that's honestly kind of raw and real in terms of its approach to this. It's kind of bittersweet. It's almost like, yeah, cool, you got everyone to see your dick, and now you're the new best friend, and you're now Monty's right hand man. But really, it's it's kind of sad. It's not really a big plus or a big win, because it's one of those things where everything is just so childish and everything's so fleeting. And I mean, you even see that with what happens when Dean decides to quit. Monty moves away from Dean super quickly. Like it's not even really something that sticks with Monty that much, because in a lot of ways Monty is honestly kind of a loser. He's kind of a deadbeat. And this job and his social status in this job in particular is all that he has. So I definitely do feel a lot of that stuff is the biggest strength of this script, as well as maybe some of the stuff dealing with difficult customers and so on. The crass humor isn't. That's really one of my biggest problems with this script, is so much of the humor is just ha 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 ha, dick and balls. Oh, the this whole repeated gag about this game that the guys play at the restaurant, where they come up with different imaginative ways to show each other their dick or their balls. And if some other guy sees the dick and balls, then they get chastised for it and called gay, and then they get kicked in the ass. And I'm like, first off, I don't even see how this is funny. This just seems cruel and just weird. And they beat it into the ground so much that it even if it was funny initially, it stops being funny really quickly because they overdo it. And there's just a lot of stuff like that where even they flip things around and the girl shows her bush, and there's all this other stuff involving the comedy that's just lazy. to me. Lazy, uninspired stoner jokes. Lazy, uninspired jokes about guys showing their dicks and their balls. Yeah, I just didn't understand why that was such a repeated gag. Like, I didn't even think it was that funny. And there's just a lot of that it just overdoes it. And speaking of dick, I mean, you have this whole subplot with this character named Calvin who is a total cuck in a lot of ways. And not only that, he has this fear of peeing in public. So that's just a consistent subplot throughout the story. Is this loser, sad sack romantic Calvin who can't pee in public. And so there's this whole thing about making it so he can pee in public and trying to help him. And I'm like, I don't give a fuck. I don't care about Calvin's fear of peeing in public. Like, I guess it's supposed to be funny. It's another thing that's supposed to be funny, but to me, it's just crass and it's dumb and boring. It's one of the reasons why I don't love this movie and I just kind of like it is because you have a lot of these subplots that are either awkward, cringe, or just lame. And this is definitely one of those lamer subplots that I could care less about. There's these two, speaking of stoners and lazy comedy, there's these two bus boys. One of them's played by Andy Milonakis, and they're useless and they're always high. And it's supposed to be funny because they're stupid and they're high all the time. I just thought they were annoying. Um, I would honestly say the biggest laughs I got out of the film was from a certain character who is just like super strung out, super just angry and just fed up with all of his bullshit. I think it's Alanna Ubach, maybe plays a character named Naomi. I think that's who it is. Yeah, she's just totally fed up with all this bullshit. She's always angry all the time and pissed off. But the actress was just so fucking funny to me in terms of the way that she played this character. Just there's this whole bit where there's this character who works in the kitchen played by Chi McBride and Bishop, who's kind of like this wise old sage, and he sees that she's having problems, and he essentially he takes her aside and he's like, hey, Naomi, if you ever want counseling in anger management or alcoholism, I'd be more than glad to do it for you. And then Naomi, she's just like, you do that for me? Thank you. I appreciate that. But I think I'd rather you just wash the fucking dishes and shut the fuck up. Fucking psychobabble bullshit asshole. So I love that character because she tells it like it is. She's honest. She's brutal about it. But it's just so funny because it's so relatable. Because a lot of people can definitely connect with her if they've worked in the services industry, because when you work in that industry long enough, you get to be more like Naomi. You're like, fuck this shit. And like when you're not dealing with customers, you're fucking pissed off and angry and fed up with this fucking place. And when you deal with customers, you got to turn on the smile. And so I love how she goes back and forth so seamlessly from being just this just total just asshole in a lot of ways, just totally just over the top in terms of her anger and vitriol, and then just turns on a dime and is like, "Hey, how's your order? How are you enjoying your order tonight? If you need anything else, I can help you." You know, that kind of stuff. Um, and there's also like this other weird subplot with Ryan Reynolds' character where he's trying to get in bed with an underage girl, which is just fucking creepy. And the script points out how lame that is and how, the guy is kind of is a loser because he's doing that. But because that's like one of the only ways he can get any sort of action is with these jailbait girls. But I think it's played off for laughs, but it just isn't funny, and it's just creepy. It's just creepy that he's just trying to conquer this underage girl and waiting for her to reach a legal age so then he can bang her. It's just like, I like Ryan Reynolds, but that's pretty scummy. And there's just a lot of that stuff, just very just scummy, or just gross attempts at humor that just don't really land. That's why I'm more drawn to the stuff that doesn't even deal with the comedy. It just deals with every day going on shenanigans at shenanigans, or the stuff that's happening outside of shenanigans with the personal lives of these characters. The cast though is amazing. Like, this is a really great cast, and I think they definitely do a lot of heavy lifting, because the script I don't think is particularly great. It's serviceable, it's average, it's there, but I don't think it's an amazing, spectacular script by any means. And it leaves a lot up to this cast, and I think for the most part they are definitely uh, game, and they're really capable of doing a ton here. Like Ryan Reynolds, his character Monty, in a lot of ways, is just a piece of shit if you really think about it. But Ryan Reynolds has this certain charisma to him. He has a certain personality that just makes him very amicable, and you like the guy despite his very just shady and just shitty aspects of his character. Anna Faris, uh, she's uh amazing in this as Serena. Just a lot of fun. You can tell that she enjoyed playing this role. Another sort of character alongside, like Naomi, who's written in a way that enables the actress to really just get the most out of this performance. Just tells it like it is, very honest, but also very sweet. You don't see the sweet aspect of Naomi. Like, she's just very bitter. But Anna Faris's character, you see some of that sweetness. Justin Long, in a lot of ways, he's the lead here. And there's that whole scene where he cusses out this one customer, this one guy who fucked him over. And it's one of those things where, oh, you shouldn't do that. But as somebody who's worked in the industry and dealt with customers, uh, it's one of those things where it's another bit of catharsis where you're like, yeah, fucking cuss that guy out and ask for the money, and that kind of thing. And it just it's one of those things where there's a lot of moments in this film that are like wish fulfillment for people who work with people, whether it's the restaurant service or just customer service in general. And yeah, I think Justin Long was just a great bit of casting. He definitely played the role very well of this guy who's just kind of stuck in a rut in his life. He just doesn't know what path he wants to take yet. And a lot of this story and a lot of this film is him waiting to figure it out. And it does help that Justin Long just has that ability to just play these kind of blank slate characters in a way where they're still entertaining to watch. Like, it's not boring, but he's definitely able to play characters that aren't so Hollywood or so over the top that you can't really necessarily see them as real people and you can't connect with them on that way. So I do feel Justin Long, at least at this point in his career, he was just so great at playing these everyman type of characters, and Dean is no exception to that. David Koechner is the manager. Dan is a jerk off. He's a total jerkwad, but David plays jerkwads with the best of them. Luis Guzman, it was fun to see him as one. He worked in the kitchen. He was one of the chefs. Uh, a lot of his shtick is the you saw my dick and balls. So it's a shame because I think he's a very talented actor and actually a pretty damn good comedian. I mean, he was a part of the cast of the very short-lived sketch comedy show on Fox called House of Buggin' with John Leguizamo, and he was hilarious in that show. And he's just given this role that he doesn't have much to do with, and he's does the best he can. Still has a lot of charisma and energy, but a lot of it's just haha, dick and balls, and that just doesn't do it for me. So I just feel it's kind of a waste of Luis Guzman almost because it's just such a limited role. Shy McBride, he was good. He was good as Bishop, the wise sage of the kitchen. Dane Cook, he played Floyd, this loudmouthed, uh, definite stoner kind of archetype character who's just this guy who talks a lot of shit, and he's the one that gets involved and adds a lot of the nasty ingredients to the dish that they give to the Karen. Um, but he was fun. I'll admit it. Like, Dane Cook he was pretty funny here in a little cameo role. John Francis Daley plays Mitch, the newbie. He's fine, I guess. He spends a lot of the movie just being a punching bag for everybody, though. And I'll give the film this, and I'll give John this. Like, his character eventually grows some balls and stands up for himself. And I think that's really what a lot of the film is with this character, at least with his plot, is him learning to just stand up for himself and be more of a man. And I guess John Francis Staley's performance is fine for that. Caitlin Doubleday played a character named Amy, who is decent. Alanna Ubach stole the show to me personally as Naomi. I love that performance. She was hilarious. And you got Robert Patrick Benedict, who plays Calvin, the shy peer. Like, for the role that he was given, he plays the role convincingly enough. He definitely does a good job playing a sad sack loser who's afraid of peeing in public. So there's a certain authenticity there, but it's not what I would call a performance that is super memorable because there's nothing that likable about that character. He's not a character that has enough traits to him that make him into like someone that you enjoy being around. The guy's a buzzkill most of the time, and yeah, the actor does a good job, but it's a role that is very thankless. Max Cash and Andy Milonakis, they play T Dog and Nick, the two annoying stoners who work as busboys. and they clean dishes and take out the trash, but so much of the film has them just on their asses, smoking weed, or just huffing whipped cream cans, or and the whole stuff with them too is they're that stereotype that was pretty prevalent around this time with the white guys acting like rappers. That's what you get here. Like Andy Milonakis even has like dreads, and that shit was always whack. If you ask me, it was fucking annoying. I think the only time it worked was in like Kicking It Old School. I think that's what it was. Was it Kicking It Old School? No, it was Malibu's Most Wanted. That's the one that worked for me with Jamie Kennedy because it was so self-aware and it was a parody of that whole persona. This is just supposed to be funny because they're white guys acting like they're tough and they're thugs and they're gangsters, and it was just cringe. Uh, Wendy Malick, she has a very brief role as Monty's mom. You might remember her. She's been in a lot of things. This is probably not one of her most memorable performances, I would say, of her career. Pretty good cast still, even though there's a few members of the cast that really weren't really anything that special. And speaking of not anything special, I mean the cinematography by Matthew Irving and not really anything what I would consider incredible. It's just there. Same thing for the editing by Andy Blumenthal and David Finfer. The music by Adam Gorgoni, nothing. Very stock, very standard. Almost feels like it's just stock music. The songs for the soundtrack are fine. Not anything like spectacular. It's not like there's a soundtrack you're gonna put on repeat, or add to your Spotify playlist. But yeah, I don't really know what to say about Waiting. I've probably done a much more in depth, longer review of this film than pretty much anyone has done on YouTube. But yeah, it's a film that I can have some fun with for the cast and for some of the parts of the plot and for some of the jokes, but it's just one of those things where at best it's a time waster for me. Uh, like something I put on while I'm doing laundry or something, so I have something on the TV. But anyway, that's my thoughts on Waiting. And until next time, I'll see you later. See ya.